My roommate started replacing my $80 conditioner with industrial-grade dish soap, but that was just the warm-up for the day I found the ledger detailing Operation Nightingale. The air in our shared apartment always smelled faintly of clean linen and expensive hair care products. That was my contribution to the domestic harmony. I'm talking top-shelf stuff, shampoos that cost more than a decent bottle of wine, serums that promise the impossible, all imported, all necessary for keeping my rather temperamental ash-blonde hair in check. My roommate, Miles, or Mill as I'd started calling him in my head, lived on a diet of instant ramen and generic soap. We were roommates by necessity, not friendship. I was a junior associate at a demanding corporate law firm. He was, ostensibly, a freelance graphic designer who mostly played video games and complained about capitalism. It started subtly. A missing bottle cap here, a slightly different scent there. I blamed the cleaning lady, then myself. Maybe I was finally getting that early onset memory loss my grandmother always warned me about. But the luxury products were expensive, and I kept meticulous track of my toiletries drawer like a small, highly paid dragon hoarding gold. The first real alarm bell rang 3 months in. I had just flown back from a grueling client summit in Tokyo, jet-lagged and desperate for my signature lavender-infused deep conditioner. I reached for the violet-colored tub, the one that smelled like a high-end spa treatment, and my fingers met plastic. Cheap, abrasive plastic. I pulled it out. It was a massive, industrial-sized bottle of fluorescent blue dish soap, the kind you use to strip grease off industrial cooking vats, not condition human hair. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was sheer, dizzying confusion. I held the viscous, chemical-smelling soap up to the light, then looked back at the empty space where $85 worth of specialized Italian hair treatment should have been. "Mill!" I yelled, my voice echoing in the sterile hallway. He emerged from his room, headphones dangling around his neck, looking utterly unconcerned. "What's the emergency, Cassandra? Did the stock market crash again?" "Where is my Kerastase Elixir Ultime?" I demanded, holding up the industrial cleaner like evidence in a murder trial. Miles blinked slowly, adjusting his thick-rimmed glasses. "Oh, that stuff? Yeah, that was empty. I tossed it." "Empty? Miles, I used it maybe 3 times last week. And this," I shook the dish soap, "is not a replacement." He sighed, a long suffering sound, as if I were the one making an issue out of nothing. "Look, Cass, be reasonable. You're using products that cost more than my monthly electricity bill to wash your hair. It's obscene. I saw you had this giant bottle of perfectly good soap. It cleans things, right? I just figured it was wasteful to keep buying luxury sludge when you had perfectly adequate cleaner sitting right there." I felt a muscle twitch in my jaw. "Adequate? This is dish soap. It's going to strip every last bit of moisture from my hair. It's literally corrosive." "Drama," he muttered, already turning back towards his room. "It's soap. Just use a little less conditioner next time. I'm trying to save us both from frivolous spending habits." Frivolous spending habits. Right. My habits included paying 60% of the rent on a prime downtown apartment because he insisted on working from the creative atmosphere and constantly claimed his freelance invoices were stuck in processing. I bought a new bottle of the shampoo that evening, triple-locked the door to my bathroom cabinet, a ridiculous measure I never thought I'd resort to, and tried to forget the incident. But the seed of suspicion, once planted, grows fast. It's amazing how much attention you suddenly pay to your roommate when you suspect he's subtly sabotaging your expensive hygiene routine. A week later, I was preparing for a crucial mediation hearing. My appearance mattered. I needed to project untouchable competence. I reached into my locked cabinet. The conditioner was there. Relief washed over me. I poured a generous amount into my hand. The texture was right, the color was right, but the smell? It was almost right. Almost. It smelled faintly of lavender, yes, but underneath that, there was a sharp, almost metallic undercurrent. It was faint, almost imperceptible unless you were deliberately testing it, like I was now. I dabbed a tiny bit onto my wrist, rubbed it in, and waited. Within 5 minutes, my skin started to feel tight, itchy, like a low-grade allergic reaction was starting. This wasn't just swapping one product for another. This was calculated, malicious substitution. Dish soap strips oil. This new substance was designed to irritate, to cause visible damage without being immediately obvious. I went to the grocery store that night and bought a cheap hair testing kit, the kind meant for checking for chemical damage at home. I took a tiny, almost invisible strand of my hair from the shower drain, sealed it in a baggie, and went back to the apartment. I locked myself in the bathroom, heart hammering against my ribs, waiting for the chemical reaction to finish developing on the testing strip. The results came back 10 agonizing minutes later. The strip showed significant levels of ammonia and a specific industrial-grade cleaning agent that definitely, absolutely, should not be anywhere near something designed for human hair. This wasn't just MIL being cheap. This was a deliberate attempt to make me look unprofessional, or worse, cause physical harm, all under the guise of saving money. I sat on the edge of the tub, staring at my reflection. He wasn't just a lazy roommate. He was actively trying to undermine me. Why? Was it jealousy? Or was this tied to something deeper, something related to his mysterious late-night phone calls that always ended abruptly when I entered the room? I knew I needed proof, irrefutable proof, that would allow me to throw him out immediately and maybe even pursue charges for assault given the chemical irritant. I decided to stage a trap. I replaced my expensive shampoo with an identical-looking bottle of highly concentrated, bright purple hair dye, the kind that stains everything it touches for weeks. I made sure to leave the cap slightly loose. I went to work the next morning, my nerves frayed, pretending I was focused on tort contracts, but really, I was just visualizing the moment I would confront him. I left an early morning meeting, claiming I forgot my presentation notes, and rushed home just before noon, slipping the key into the lock silently. The apartment was quiet. Miles's gaming headset was sitting on the coffee table, but he was nowhere in sight. I walked toward the kitchen, my eyes scanning for any sign of movement, any indication he was hiding. Then I saw it. Not in the bathroom, not in his room. On the pristine white marble counter in the kitchen, there was a large, dark purple stain spreading rapidly, eating into the stone like acid. And next to the stain, lying discarded on the floor, was the empty, dripping bottle of the bright purple hair dye. Miles hadn't used it in the shower. He had poured the entire contents, almost a liter of professional-strength dye, directly into the main Brita filter pitcher he kept filled with drinking water, right next to the sink. My lungs seized up. He wasn't just trying to ruin my hair. He was trying to poison me, or worse, frame me for a bizarre chemical spill. I spun around, ready to scream his name, when I heard the sound of rapid typing coming from the small storage closet off the living room. I knew he sometimes used it as a makeshift sound-dampened office. I approached the closet door slowly, my hand reaching for the knob. As I turned it, the typing stopped abruptly. The door swung inward, revealing not Miles, but a makeshift workstation illuminated by a single harsh desk lamp. Miles wasn't there, but his laptop was open, and displayed on the screen, open in a secure encrypted window, wasn't graphic design software. It was a complex digital ledger filled with codes, dates, and offshore account numbers. And emblazoned right at the top of the document, next to a logo featuring a stylized, jagged eagle, was the heading, Operation Nightingale, Distribution Network, Phase 3, Activation. And underneath that, a recent entry detailing the acquisition of unmarked, high-grade industrial solvents, scheduled for delivery this afternoon. My stomach dropped as I realized the industrial soap wasn't just about washing my hair. This wasn't about wasting money. This was about something far, far more dangerous, and I had just walked into the middle of it. My mind raced, trying to process the image burned onto my retina. Operation Nightingale. It sounded like something out of a bad spy thriller, not the quiet life of a freelance designer in our overpriced apartment complex. The ledger wasn't just financial. It included surveillance notes, dates of interest, and what looked chillingly like schematics for small, complex devices. I didn't recognize the Eagle logo, but the sheer professionalism and secrecy radiating off the screen screamed organized network, far beyond simple scams or petty theft. I instinctively reached for my phone, fingers fumbling to dial the emergency line, the one I knew by heart from law school drills. But before I could even unlock the screen, a voice, dangerously low and devoid of its usual sarcastic edge, cut through the silence of the small closet. "I wouldn't do that, Cass." Miles stood in the doorway, blocking my exit. He wasn't wearing his oversized hoodie or glasses. He was dressed in dark, well-tailored tactical clothing that looked profoundly out of place against the backdrop of our cheap IKEA shelving unit. His demeanor had shifted entirely. The lazy, entitled roommate was gone, replaced by someone cold, calculating, and utterly focused. His eyes, usually hidden behind thick lenses, were sharp and seemed to take in my every potential move. "Miles," I managed, my voice a tight squeak. I tried to sound composed, lawyerly, but the adrenaline surging through me felt like liquid fire. "What is this? What are you doing?" He stepped into the main room, casually leaning against the doorframe, effectively trapping me in the hallway between the kitchen counter, now smeared with brilliant purple death, and him. Doing? Just managing my investments. You saw what I don't use my high-end income for, Cassandra. You're excellent at prosecuting people who engage in frivolous spending. I, on the other hand, prefer investments that yield real dividends. He nodded toward the laptop screen, where the ledger glowed ominously. Nightingale is quite profitable, actually, once you account for the risk assessment. Risk assessment? I repeated, trying to sound curious rather than terrified. This looks like material for a very serious charge, Miles. Attempted poisoning, conspiracy. I paused, searching for the right legal term, hoping the sound of it would shock him back to reality. This is way past simple roommate disagreements over toiletries. He actually smiled, a thin, humorless expression that didn't reach his eyes. "You're good, Cass. You really are. Always framing things legally. That's why I kept you around. You see the structure, the vulnerability in the system. I needed someone in a high-security corporate environment who wouldn't notice the minor background noise of my actual work." He gestured dismissively toward the purple stain. "The shampoo debacle? That was purely practical. You use enough high-end products to fund a small operation. I needed to test your perception, see how quickly you noticed anomalies, and establish a pattern of plausible denial on my end." My breath hitched. He had been testing me. The dish soap, the strange itching, it was all reconnaissance. And the poison, Miles? The solvents listed here? What is Nightingale actually doing? I asked, pushing the interrogation tactic. If I was going down, I was going down knowing the whole story. He walked past me toward the living room window, drawing the heavy blinds shut with a decisive thwack. The room plunged into near darkness, illuminated only by the harsh glow from the closet. Nightingale is about creating leverage, Cass. Sometimes, to ensure certain political outcomes, you need to apply pressure where the established channels can't reach. Think of it as targeted, strategic disruption. The solvents are for an application later today, something that needs to look like a catastrophic industrial failure, but which requires a very specific, untraceable delivery system. A delivery system I almost had perfectly organized. He looked back at me, his expression darkening. "Until you decided to play amateur detective this morning and opened my secure space." "You think I'm going to cover for you?" I scoffed, finding a sliver of my old bravado. "I'm a prosecutor's dream witness. You won't get away with this." Miles chuckled, a dry, grating sound. He walked over to the counter and cautiously dipped a gloved finger into the remaining purple dye before wiping it on a paper towel. "Oh, I know you won't cover for me, Cassandra. That's the complication. You're too ethical, too ambitious, and too smart to simply disappear." He reached into the back pocket of his tactical pants and slowly withdrew something that made the air feel suddenly thin and cold. It wasn't a large weapon, nothing like the heavy instruments I'd seen in movies. It was sleek, black, and disturbingly compact. "I had planned for a clean extraction today, after the delivery was complete," he continued, his voice steady, almost conversational, as he aimed the small device directly at my chest. "But now the timeline has accelerated, and frankly, I can't afford an ethical, ambitious witness with a detailed understanding of my entire operational structure wandering around, especially not one who can name the specific cleaning agents I used in my preliminary experiments." My heart hammered so hard I thought my ribs might crack. This was no longer about a hostile takeover of my bathroom shelf. This was about silence, the ultimate, final silence. "You can't do this, Miles. If you hurt me, the security services will trace everything back to this apartment, back to Operation Nightingale," I pleaded, my voice cracking as I subconsciously backed up against the wall, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Miles shook his head with an almost sad pity. That's where you're mistaken, Cass. See, I've been preparing for years. If I disappear, Nightingale continues. If I'm caught, the fail-safes engage. But if you disappear, right after you've been caught red-handed tampering with industrial-grade chemicals and staining a communal surface with high-strength dye, well, that looks like an entirely different scenario. He took one deliberate step closer, the small weapon steady in his hand. Your firm just lost that huge merger case last month, didn't they? Stress levels are high. You get angry, you get careless. You try to sabotage my cleaning supplies out of spite. You mix up your chemicals, and the whole thing blows up in your face, literally or figuratively. A tragic accident involving an overzealous junior lawyer and some imported cleaning supplies. Plausible deniability achieved. He lifted the device slightly, his expression hardening. It was always going to be one of us who left this apartment, Cassandra, and since you've stumbled onto the ledger... Suddenly, an alarm blared, not from my phone, but from the laptop still glowing in the dark closet. It wasn't a standard computer warning. It was a deep, resonant siren, accompanied by a synthesized, automated voice cutting through the air. Security breach. Unauthorized access detected. External compliance protocol initiated. Dispersal sequence commencing in T-minus 60 seconds. Miles froze, his eyes darting from the laptop to me, a flicker of pure panic crossing his face for the first time. What the hell? That's not supposed to trigger until the dispersal is complete, he roared, dropping the weapon slightly as he spun toward the laptop. Who else is linked to this system? The shrill electronic siren of the laptop was deafening in the sudden quiet of the apartment, a sound that completely shattered Miles's carefully constructed composure. His tactical focus vaporized, replaced by the frantic energy of a trapped animal. He abandoned the small weapon, which clattered harmlessly onto the rug near my feet, and lunged back toward the closet, shoving aside the half-open door. No, no, no! Protocol override! Shut down! He hissed into the machine, his fingers flying across the keyboard in a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. I didn't hesitate. The dropped weapon was my chance. It was small, maybe a taser or some kind of stun device, but in this moment, it represented leverage. I snatched it up, my hands slick with nervous sweat, keeping the small dark object pointed vaguely in his direction, though I had absolutely no idea how to operate it. "What is commencing, Miles?" I demanded, forcing my voice to remain steady despite the violent tremor running through my entire body. "What did you set off?" He didn't look up. "It doesn't matter. Someone external has flagged the access attempt. They think the ledger was compromised by an outside entity, someone trying to expose the system before the delivery." He hammered one final key, leaning back with a strained grunt. "The dispersal sequence. It's not just the solvents. It's a total system purge. Everything here, all the data, all the evidence, will be wiped remotely, and this apartment will be locked down by their internal security team." Internal security team? My mind immediately jumped to law enforcement, but the terminology felt off, too corporate, too secret. What organization are you running operations for? Miles finally looked up, his face pale beneath the harsh glow of the monitor. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, toward the apartment door. "The people who employ your bosses, Cass," he whispered, his voice laced with genuine fear. "The ones who hate leaks more than they hate insolvency. We aren't criminals in the street sense. We are the architects of stability, and you just triggered their emergency containment measure." The building's intercom crackled violently, overriding the siren on the laptop. A deep, synthesized voice, calm and utterly devoid of human inflection, announced, "Unauthorized personnel detected in Unit 14B. Containment field activation in T-minus 90 seconds. Prepare for extraction." Extraction. The word chilled me to the core. Miles grabbed a sleek black backpack that had been hidden beneath his desk chair. I hadn't even noticed it before, and began stuffing external hard drives into padded slots. "We have 90 seconds. I can still override the immediate lockdown, but I need to get to the server access panel outside the building. You, however, are a liability." He turned back to me, and the calculating look was back, mixed with a strange desperation. "You have two choices, Cass. Choice 1, stay here. When the extraction team arrives, you are the evidence. They'll assume you were trying to hack me, that you were responsible for the chemical tampering, and you'll be looking at decades of legal nightmares, the kind of black bag treatment that makes federal prison look like a spa vacation. They won't care about your corporate job. They'll bury it. He paused, gesturing toward the small weapon still clutched in my hand. Choice 2. You come with me. You have a security clearance level high enough to be useful for the next few hours, even if you are about to become collateral damage. You know systems. I know the routes. We survive this containment sequence together, and then we can discuss who gets to live to expose whom. He threw a small electronic fob across the room. It skittered across the hardwood floor and stopped near my feet. That fob overrides the magnetic lock on the service elevator door in the basement. We have less than a minute before the building seals itself against the outside world. Make your choice now, Cass. The door is closing. I looked down at the fob, then at the small, terrifying device in my hand, then at the purple stain spreading across the marble, a testament to the chaos he had unleashed. My entire career, my carefully constructed life, was balanced on the edge of a razor blade. If I stayed, I was finished, framed for a crime far beyond my wildest nightmares. If I went with him, I was willingly walking into the hands of whatever shadowy organization was about to sweep through the building. Just as I bent down to snatch the fob, the external intercom changed its tone, becoming urgent and sharper. T-minus 30 seconds. Containment field charging. All non-essential personnel vacate perimeter immediately. Miles didn't wait for my answer. He bolted for the kitchen door, already moving toward the rear exit that led down to the building's forgotten service corridors. I made my decision in a fraction of a second, driven by pure, primal self-preservation. I jammed the unknown weapon into my waistband, snatched the fob, and sprinted after him, throwing one last panicked glance toward the window, expecting to see armored vehicles already surrounding the tower. We reached the seldom-used utility stairwell leading down to the sublevels. Miles hammered a code into the keypad controlling the heavy steel door. It clicked open, just as the building's internal speakers let out a final, chilling announcement. Containment field activated. All internal access points secured. The steel door slammed shut behind us with a deafening clang. We were trapped inside the building's infrastructure, plunging down into darkness, Miles leading the way, me clinging to the hope that the data he was trying to save was evidence against Nightingale, not proof of its scope. We reached the concrete expanse of the sublevel parking garage, the air thick with dust and the smell of stale exhaust. Miles pointed toward a dimly lit corner where a single, unmarked black van was idling silently, its engine barely a hum. Get in, he urged, pulling the passenger door open. As I scrambled into the van, pulling the door shut behind me, I looked back one last time toward the main entrance lobby, visible through the grimy floor-to-ceiling windows. Even from this distance, I could see the flicker of powerful spotlights. 3 large figures in dark, featureless uniforms were advancing across the marble floor, moving with terrifying speed, carrying equipment that looked disturbingly heavy. They weren't police. They were too organized, too silent. Miles slammed the service door shut with his fob, effectively sealing the entrance behind us, and threw the van into gear. As the tires screeched on the concrete peeling out of the garage and into the narrow back alleyway, I noticed something critically important. The hard drives he had crammed into his backpack were sitting wide open on the seat between us, one of them having popped loose during the hasty escape. And nestled among the cables and empty slots, clearly visible in the dim light of the alley, was a small metallic object I hadn't noticed before. It was an official-looking security badge, bearing the same jagged eagle logo, but beneath the logo, in clear, sharp lettering, was a title that made my blood run colder than any chemical agent ever could. Directorate of Corporate Oversight, Internal Security Division. Miles wasn't just involved in a shadowy organization. He was working for the enforcement arm of the very corporate elite I spent my life trying to serve, and he had just abducted me from a building that was currently being raided by his own colleagues. The world outside the black van seemed to blur into streaks of neon and shadow as Miles drove with reckless precision through the city's underbelly. My breath hitched as I stared at the security badge. The Directorate of Corporate Oversight. It wasn't an organized crime network. It was the shadow government of the 1%, the people who made sure that the laws I argued in court were merely suggestions for their peers. And Miles, my cheap, ramen-eating roommate, was apparently one of their internal enforcers. "You're one of them?" I whispered, the realization hitting me with the physical force of a punch. "You work for the people who dictate policy for global finance? And you've been using my apartment to, what, run industrial espionage?" Miles didn't take his eyes off the road, his jaw tight. "I told you, Cass. Leverage. They offer stability, absolute systemic control. I was the cleanup crew, the necessary evil to maintain the structure. You, with your meticulous notes and perfect corporate veneer, were the perfect blind spot. Nobody ever suspects the junior associate who complains about parking tickets is living next door to a major operational node." He glanced down at the ID badge lying half exposed on the seat between us. "That badge, that means someone else initiated the lockdown, someone higher up than me, someone who clearly wasn't expecting me to be running a purge protocol this early." The van hit a pothole hard enough to make my teeth rattle, and the loose hard drive tumbled further, knocking against the main backpack. Miles snatched at the backpack protectively, pulling it closer to his chest. "We need to disappear before their ground teams can triangulate this vehicle," he said, his tone shifting back into directive mode. "They'll assume I'm compromised, and they'll assume you're a hostile element I abducted." "Abducted is the right word, Miles," I shot back, gripping the small, unfamiliar weapon in my waistband. "You tried to poison me with hair products, and now you're leading me toward, what, a black site?" "Towards safety, if you stick to the plan," he countered, sounding genuinely exasperated. "I know the protocols they use for containment. If we can reach the secondary egress point before they establish a perimeter, we can get out of the city grid. Once we're off the main surveillance network, we can figure out who executed that premature purge. Because someone clearly felt threatened enough by Nightingale's data to burn the entire operation down prematurely." He veered sharply onto a darkened access road leading toward the industrial docks. The air grew heavy with the smell of salt and rusted metal. "Why would they purge their own operation?" I pressed. Unless Nightingale wasn't about stability, unless it was a rogue element within the directorate." Miles let out a short, barking laugh. "Rogue? Cass, in this world, everyone is rogue until they have enough dirt on everyone else to ensure mutual destruction. Nightingale was becoming too effective, too independent. My superiors were getting nervous about the data I was hoarding, data that proved how deep the rot went, even within the Directorate's own Oversight Council. They wanted the operation scrubbed before I could use the leverage. He pulled the van into the shadow of a massive, rusting shipping container. He killed the engine, and the sudden silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant groan of the ocean. "They're coming, Cass. They will be sweeping this entire quadrant looking for my vehicle signature. We have maybe 5 minutes before a drone or a patrol car spots us. I need you to watch my back while I interface with the emergency beacon hidden in this container." He shoved the backpack containing the crucial drives into my lap. "Protect this. If they get this data, they bury everything, including the evidence of what they were planning to do to you with those industrial solvents." He opened the passenger door, the beam of his tactical flashlight cutting a narrow path through the gloom. He moved with a practiced, silent efficiency toward the nearest shipping container, marked with faded, foreign lettering. I sat frozen, clutching the bag of evidence and the strange weapon. I was a lawyer, not a bodyguard for a shadow operative who was also a domestic saboteur. But the threat from the Directorate, the real threat, was palpable, suffocating. Miles reached the container and began working on a small, almost invisible panel near the base. I scanned the surrounding dockyard, the vast, empty expanse feeling suddenly full of invisible eyes. Then I heard it. Not the heavy tread of the ground teams, but the distinct, high-pitched whine of an aerial drone approaching fast. It was low, designed for stealth, and it was sweeping directly toward our location. "Miles! Drone! Fast approach!" I yelled, my voice echoing weakly in the vast space. He didn't flinch, his fingers still working feverishly on the panel. 10 seconds, Cass. Just hold the position." I raised the unknown weapon, aiming vaguely in the direction of the noise. I had no idea if it fired projectiles or electricity, but the sheer desperation lent my hand a false sense of steadiness. The drone swept over the top of the container, its infrared light momentarily bathing us both in a sickly orange glow. It seemed to pass, heading toward the main shipping lane. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. But then the drone stopped. It hovered, executing a sharp, impossible 180-degree turn. It wasn't looking for a vehicle signature anymore. It had locked onto the only thing generating significant heat deviation nearby, the laptop I'd left running on the kitchen counter miles away, which must have been transmitting a final beacon signal before the purge completed. The drone didn't fire. Instead, a small mechanical arm extended from its undercarriage, and it began deploying a fine, shimmering mist directly down toward the roof of the building we had just fled. Miles ripped the access panel off the container, revealing a complex array of wires and a blinking red receiver. He slammed his hand onto the backpack containing the evidence. Too late. The remote purge just executed. It wasn't a wipe. It was an aerosol deployment. They didn't want to destroy the data. They wanted to disperse it, he shouted over the returning drone whine. He pulled out the receiver unit, and his face went ashen as he read the status display. That mist. It's an active tracking agent, Cass. It's airborne. It's designed to adhere to organic tissue and to any metallic surfaces exposed to the deployment zone. He looked directly at me, his eyes wide with horror. They know exactly where we are. They didn't need the van's signature. They deployed the tracking agent at the source of the data breach, and now that agent is settling on everything in that apartment, including the clothes you were wearing, the hairbrush you used this morning, and everything you've touched since you left that building. Before I could process the terrifying implications of being dusted with invisible tracking powder, Miles slammed the receiver into the backpack. We have to move now. But the problem is, the Directorate doesn't only track agents. They track compromised assets. And right now, Cass, you are the carrier pigeon for the most volatile evidence in the country. And I think they just sent someone much worse than a drone to collect you. From the far end of the dock, where the ocean mist met the industrial haze, a second vehicle emerged. It wasn't a patrol car. It was a heavy, unmarked, armored personnel carrier, moving with purposeful, terrifying speed directly toward our position. And as it turned slightly, revealing its darkened, heavily reinforced front, I saw something mounted prominently on its roof, a specialized winch system ending in a heavy-duty capture net, clearly designed for non-compliant acquisition. The armored vehicle was a declaration of war, not a standard retrieval operation. This wasn't Miles's internal security team. This was the heavy-duty response, the division called in when the target was too valuable or too dangerous to allow for subtlety. They weren't here to quietly escort us away. They were here to secure the asset, me, and eliminate the compromised element, Miles. The net, Miles breathed, his voice barely audible over the growing roar of the APC's engine. That's the rapid containment unit. They aren't messing around. They assume I'm turning hostile, and they assume you're the volatile payload they need to neutralize quietly. He didn't try to hide anymore. He ripped the backpack containing the drives off my lap, clutching it like a shield. Cass, I need you to trust me one last time. Your legal mind is my only advantage now. They're tracking the exposure. They think I'm leading them to the data. They won't expect us to use the data against them immediately. The APC was closing the distance, its massive tires crunching over the gravel. I looked down at the small, dark weapon still tucked into my waistband. I had to make a choice between a dubious savior and certain capture by an organization that specialized in making people vanish. How do we fight a moving fortress, Miles? I asked, my voice suddenly steady. The adrenaline had burned away the fear, leaving only the cold, analytical focus of a litigator facing an impossible motion. We don't fight the armor, we fight the rules, he said, throwing the van into reverse, aiming it back toward the exit they had just used. The data on these drives isn't just leverage, it's a tripwire. It's set to release publicly every ledger, every communication, every name on that Directorate manifest, the instant this vehicle is disabled or the encryption key is forcefully breached. He slammed the van into a tight three-point turn, facing the oncoming APC. They want the drives intact. They need to contain the narrative. If they know they can't get us alive without risking total exposure, they'll try to disable the vehicle without compromising the payload. That means EMP blasts, or maybe specialized taser fields. They won't use kinetic force unless they have no other option. He paused, giving me a sharp, direct look. When they initiate the EMP pulse, and they will to knock out our comms and the van's electronics, you hit the emergency release on the harness on my seat. It's tied to a secondary external trigger. What trigger? What are you going to do? I'm going to give them something else to track besides the van and your potentially contaminated clothes, he said, pulling a secondary, smaller device from his inner jacket pocket, a device that looked like a specialized miniature transmitter. When the EMP hits, the system will be momentarily vulnerable. I need to get this transmitter onto their vehicle. It's coded to look like the primary Nightingale data core, a decoy that forces their onboard system to prioritize its capture. The APC was now 50 yards away, its heavy spotlight blinding us. "Ready?" Miles yelled over the engine noise. I nodded, taking a deep breath. I gripped the unfamiliar weapon. The APC fired first. It wasn't a bullet. It was a focused, silent wave of energy. The van immediately died. The headlights flickered violently and extinguished. The dashboard went dark, and the engine coughed into silence. We were completely blind and dead in the water. "Now!" Miles roared. I slapped the emergency release button on my seatbelt harness. A loud clunk echoed from beneath the vehicle. Simultaneously, Miles flung open his door, sprinted toward the APC, and hurled the decoy transmitter with uncanny accuracy. It smacked against the heavy grille of the lead vehicle and instantly began emitting a pulsing, high-frequency ping. The Directorate vehicle immediately stopped its advance. From its roof, the massive capture net did not deploy. Instead, heavy metallic arms swung out, grasping for the decoy device Miles had attached. They were prioritizing the data signal over the immediate capture of the vehicle. This was my moment. As Miles retreated to the relative cover of the van's shadow, I pulled the strange weapon from my waistband, pointed it toward the APC's nearest reinforced tire, and pressed the single protruding button. A loud, sharp crack ripped through the night, followed by a visible blue arc of energy that struck the tire sidewall. The rubber immediately smoked and hissed, but the massive tire didn't explode. It simply began rapidly deflating, sinking under the weight of the armored bulk. The diversion worked perfectly. The APC, now facing imminent immobilization, had to shift its operational priority. The armored crew inside, realizing they couldn't secure the primary data core, the decoy, and capture the two fleeing suspects simultaneously, chose the payload. The internal comms crackled audibly, even from this distance, ordering a secondary deployment team to secure the decoy signal. Miles was already scrambling back into the van. "They're sending ground teams to secure the decoy. We have maybe 2 minutes before they realize the vehicle is still here. Get behind the wheel." I slid across the driver's seat, my hands finding the ignition. Miraculously, the van's secondary battery, rigged for emergency dockyard use, sputtered to life. I threw the gear shift into drive. "Where are we going?" I demanded, peeling out of the dockyard, heading away from the city center. Miles, breathing hard, expertly opened the heavy backpack. He pulled out a single, encrypted thumb drive, ignoring the external ones. "We are not running from them, Cass. We are going to expose them. You are a lawyer. You know how to use the legal system as a weapon better than I know how to build one." He looked at the small drive in his hand, then at me. "This is the key that activates the public release of everything on those other drives. The names, the solvent orders, the whole Nightingale structure, including the Directorate's involvement. But it needs an official channel. It needs someone who can walk into a federal courthouse with verifiable evidence and blow the lid off this entire operation before they can deploy their cleanup crews." He jammed the key into the van's auxiliary data port, a hidden interface only accessible through a specific sequence of key presses that only he knew. "I'm going to give you the only thing I have left. The evidence that will protect you and destroy them," Miles stated, his voice taking on the solemn tone of a man making a final testament. "But I can't go with you. If I walk into court, they'll erase me instantly, and they'll seize the evidence before you can even file the injunction." He reached over and slapped a transfer sequence into the onboard computer. "When we hit the city limits, I'm getting out. I'm going to draw the immediate pursuit away from you and this van. You drive straight to the Department of Justice building. Use that weapon. It's a high-voltage stunner. If anyone tries to stop you before you cross that threshold, use it. Don't hesitate. They won't risk detonating the data core while you're still in the vicinity. As we sped under the first overpass leading back toward the downtown core, Miles was already preparing to leave. He checked his own tactical gear, his expression now serene, resigned. "Cassandra," he said, his eyes meeting mine for the first time without malice, without condescension, just grim understanding. "I may have swapped your expensive shampoo for dish soap, but I'm giving you the chemical agent that will scrub the corruption out of the whole damn system. Don't waste it." He opened the passenger door while we were moving at nearly 60 miles an hour, braced himself against the frame, and then, with a sudden powerful surge, he vaulted out of the moving van and disappeared into the darkness beneath the overpass, the heavy thud of his landing barely audible over the rush of the tires. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I gripped the steering wheel, the van suddenly feeling cavernous and empty. I drove toward the towering glass monolith of the federal courthouse, the encrypted drive humming softly in the port, the final act of self-preservation and vengeance playing out not through violence, but through the cold, hard logic of the law. I was contaminated, yes, but now I held the antidote for the entire sickness. The expensive shampoo was gone, replaced by a much higher price, the price of truth. I pressed the accelerator, praying I would make it across the threshold before the directorate's silent cleanup crews realized their compromised operative had just traded his life for his witness.